Hey there, welcome to Takeaway with Sam Oches, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, and this is the show where I give you an all-access pass to the restaurant industry's most influential decision-makers. This week, I'm talking with Regina Simmons and Carlos Corral, two of the four co-founders behind the plant-based, fast-casual Tacotarian. This Las Vegas-based concept now has 5 locations between Vegas and San Diego, and it has big ambitions to change Americans' minds about vegan food using authentic Mexican recipes. Regina and Carlos joined the podcast to share their insights on designing a plant-based Mexican menu and to talk about how a visit from Vice President Kamala Harris has helped them build a national buzz that is the gift that keeps on giving. In this conversation, you'll learn more about the biggest hurdle for vegan brands and how to overcome it, why commissaries are the perfect solution to ensuring consistency and efficiency, and why close community ties are the foundation to building a buzz around your brand. Jumping now into my interview with Tacotarian co-founders Regina Simmons and Carlos Corral. Also, don't forget to stick around after the interview as I will share my 7 takeaways from this discussion, actionable insights that you can take with you on the go. Restaurant leaders need 2 things to grow their businesses. They need connections to better inform their decision-making, and they need a break. Running a restaurant company is hard work. Nation's Restaurant News is offering both this fall at our Create Experience. Held October 1st through 3rd in beautiful Palm Springs, California, the Create Experience promises to be an unforgettable 3 days for growth-minded restaurateurs. Better yet, it's totally free for restaurant leaders. Join us in Palm Springs to be a part of this one-of-a-kind experience. Visit create.nrn.com/Palm Springs to learn more and to register. That's create.nrn.com/Palm Springs. Okay, Regina Simmons and Carlos Corral of Tacotarian. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. Excited to talk about your brand. You guys are creating quite a buzz. You're out there in the Western U.S., but even me here in the Eastern U.S., I hear all about Tacotarian, and it's not just because of what I do for a living. I think that's great credit to what you guys have built there, but we got to start from the beginning and just talk about how did this brand come to be. Tell me, how did Tacotarian get started? Where did the idea, the kernel of the idea come from?
Well, naturally, we're Mexican, so naturally we wanted to open a Mexican restaurant. So we love tacos, we love Mexican food, and we're super passionate about eating good food. Carlos and Kristen, when we started this project, they still vegan. My husband and I were not vegan, but hanging out with them, traveling to Mexico together, we realized how flavorful vegan food is and how the protein, the animal product is not really necessary on the dish to make it a good dish. I always tell people that in Mexico, eating proteins or eating an animal, it's a privilege. So that's why the Mexican food is so flavorful, like the sauces, the tortilla, like everything around it. So that's like for us, we traveled to Mexico. We realized that vegan food was like very, very accessible and we could create an amazing menu with it. So we just came back to Vegas and we started working on it. And with recipes from our friends and family and a lot of our work, we just built this great menu, and it's Tacotarian.
Yeah. Plant-based, I feel like plant-based, obviously still very much in the early days here in the U.S. and probably globally as well, but plant-based kind of means something to American consumers. They might think of Impossible or Beyond Burgers, and more, even more, you might maybe think tofu or something like that. But how did you work to create a menu that was plant-based, but that still had those touch points for consumers to not be scared away, I guess you could say?
Well, I think the key for us was to get variety, right? So there's going to be a lot of people that are okay with eating maybe Beyond or Impossible or like the fake meats, if that's how they call it. We also wanted to have an alternative for them, having maybe an avocado taco or hibiscus taco or mushroom taco, which is just literally just vegetables that we just season and like maybe we put like a mole sauce on top, or maybe like a green or
Yeah.
cilantro lime dressing. Like, we have fun with a lot of our dishes just to make sure we are authentic and we respect that Mexican food, but we also are work on having like a fun menu that where you can maybe have a corn with mayo and takis on top of it. You know, like we want to make sure we have variety and we have a little bit for everyone on the menu.
Yeah. I couldn't agree
Were,
more. Yeah.
were any kind of flavors or I guess you could say like menu vehicles platforms that you had to do or couldn't do? Because again, if you're adapting to the American palate,
Hmm.
and the American thinks Mexican food, they think one thing. So what did you have to do and what couldn't you do when it came to recognizing that? I guess.
Well, that for me it was hard at the beginning because I really wanted to do this like authentic Mexican food, and everything has to be real and everything has to be the way my grandma makes it.
Yeah.
And with time we realized that no, the fact that your grandma takes 20 hours to make this mole is not going to make a difference. And we also started recognizing that again, the American people recognize Mexican food in a different way. Where, yeah, I wanted to bring I keep talking about mole, right? But I wanted to bring our plantain taco with mole sauce. We also brought like our gabacho taco, which is inspired by Taco Bell, which is like a crunchy shell with ground beef and American cheese and lettuce and pico. So that's where we wanted to bring a little bit of both. But we did have to adapt and change a little bit, like the way we were feeling at the beginning had to change through the process just to make sure we had a product that people love and recognize, and they recognize those flavors, so they come back over and over.
Yeah. Also, if I might say something else about that, like that what you were mentioning, Regina, like authentic food. Like Mexico is so big, and there's so many diverse, cuisines in Mexico. Like for example, like it's different from one state to the other. And like you had a great guest not too long ago, Lauren Fernandez, and she was mentioning something that like you really resonated. Like like you go to Baja and you go to Oaxaca, and you're gonna find the same item made in completely two different ways. So authentic. It, I mean, we're Mexicans, and people tell us like, "Is this really authentic?" And I was like, "Well, it depends where you go and where you ate it." Like so that's a big part of the Mexican cuisine as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So going back even further, you guys are two of four co-founders, right? There's four of you all together. What
Correct.
was the story of how you guys came together to ultimately want to open a restaurant like Tacotarian?
Regina and her husband Dan and I used to work together for this other company since 2003, 2004. So we already have been together for about 15, 16 years before we even decided to venture into Tacotarian. So because we knew each other, we trusted each other, and being in the food industry, it's hard, like so you have to have partners that you can trust and have the same vision as you. So opening a restaurant for us, it was like, okay, well, we've been doing this for 15 years already. Like, let's add one more to the pile, and that's how we venture into like decided to go together, pretty much.
Restaurants are not for the faint of heart. So you guys had
No.
already overcome the restaurants are hard part.
Yes.
So it sounds like to me, based on what you've said about the menu, I mean, it sounds to me like you guys from the jump must have known you wanted to open something that could scale, right? Was that the idea, to open something that you knew could scale, or based on Regina, your reaction, or maybe you didn't know that this would work at all?
I don't think you jump in especially like with you been working for someone for so long and building systems and everything for someone else. And then you take everything you have and you're like, okay, let's do it. We can do this. I think you're just thinking small at that moment. You're like, I just want to make this work. I just want to get my money back and hope for the best. I think after year one, we realized that we were sitting on something wonderful. Like because like from the first Tacotarian, every year we open a new Tacotarian, and it's been 5 years. We have 5 Tacotarians, but we just realized on the first year how huge this was and how amazing this project was. But I think it took a minute to get there. It wasn't right away that we understood how great of a job we did creating the company.
What was it? What was that after the opening the first one that you could tell we got something special here? What was that moment that you realized like, oh, we can scale this thing?
I think it was right after we opened our second location in the Arts District. I mean, there was a need for vegan tacos in the community, and once we opened the downtown location right previous to the pandemic, it was like December of 2019. So we were super excited. Everybody in the downtown area was super excited. We were coming down there. But just that buzz of, like people like just telling us like, hey, your food is amazing. If you don't tell me, like, I wouldn't even tell that this is not, real meat. This is just plant-based. So having that, like embrace from the food and beverage community here in Vegas, like that's what really made us. And the vegan community here in Las Vegas, it's really big. It's really big, and it just felt like the right thing to do.
I only go to Vegas for conferences, so forgive me because I'm not super familiar with the Vegas food scene outside of just what I know from the outside of it. But you mentioned that there's a big scene for vegans, but also with the tourism. Like, how do you appeal to a city that is very transient, a city that is very based on tourists, and especially when you open downtown? I imagine there's a lot. It's a different playbook you must have to follow than when you're just serving the suburbs. So how does that change your perspective on running the restaurant?
Well, it definitely changed. Like doing the first location, it's like literally on Summerlin, and it's all a neighborhood. When we opened the second location, which it was the Arts District, it was actually better for us because we really depend on the non-vegans for this project to succeed. Where we do have a lot of vegan followers and we love them, we appreciate them. Really, our goal is to change people's minds about veganism, just normalize it. And with the downtown location, we realized that a lot of people were just coming in, eating, loving the food, and then coming back. And then by the third time, realizing that everything that they've been eating was vegan. So I think the downtown location, it was probably the easiest location that we have based on the foot traffic. But it helped us a lot to allow people to try. A lot of people won't try vegan because it's vegan, right? They're like, oh, sorry, I'm not vegan. I cannot eat vegan food. We're like, do you eat vegan every day? You just eat meat on top of it. But I think that's what's helping us break that ice with people and let them in, try the food, and then change the perspective about it, which is the hardest part when you're opening a plant-based project. Making people want to try your food because we know you're gonna like it, but a lot of people's minds, like, we're brainwashed since we're born, so a lot of people, they won't try it. So we just want that chance. If people give us just one chance and they come in, we know we can change their minds. And I think downtown actually made it easier for us and help us because more and more people were going there, more tourists and more locals were going in that area. That actually help the other locations in the suburbs.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that plant-based has such a sort of novelty to it, I guess you could say. I mean, again, we're still in the early days of it, and so there's a lot of brands that have popped up, not naming names, but some that I think are trying to sort of ride the wave, so to speak, and that's where it feels like it comes across as novelty. And so I guess I wonder sometimes if customers get skeptical from that because they almost don't trust another quote unquote trend. But Regina, to your point, people eat vegan all the time. It just doesn't really have the labels of vegan. And so when they slap a label on it, that's when it kind of comes across as this sort of novelty. So all of that is to bring me to the question of just like, what have you learned about the menu over the years? Because as you guys do try to position this thing as, no, it's not a vegan brand. Like, this is just a restaurant that happens to be plant-based, happens to serve vegan foods. how have you had to like adapt the menu and just and make sure you're walking that line, I guess you could say?
Well, a lot of it, like I always tell people, like if you go to the restaurant, you'll find all the common names. Like if you eat a carne asada taco, pastor taco, a birria taco, like we don't say fake carne asada or no pastor or like, like everything on our menu, it's like labeled with a common name so people recognize flavors. And I think that's key to, like, we don't even call ourselves vegan. Like we call everything plant-based, and it's really like Tacotarian plant-based, like in the middle, like in the bottom.
Yeah.
And we always tell people we're not trying to make anyone vegan. Like we just want you, like if on Mondays you eat Chinese food, on Tuesdays you may eat a pizza, and Wednesdays you might eat plant-based Mexican, on Thursday, like we just want this to be a normal thing, and people, make it like a normal thing that they're just eating.
Sure.
Totally.
Not to get too in the weeds on menu here, but just because obviously it's pertinent with the vegan angle. Another thing about I think the plant-based movement is you've seen there were a lot of brands that built around a provider of plant-based products, and so you saw sort of this boom in a couple of vendors that were creating the plant-based product. But I think it has matured to where you do now see the proprietary plant-based offerings. And I guess I'm wondering for you guys, if you could get into the weeds a little bit on the menu innovation and how you've developed plant-based products in a proprietary fashion to ensure that, unique and differentiating flavors that Tacotarian can provide. What does that look like?
Well, we do make our own proteins, So it is all proprietary within the company, of course, which is something that nobody else does. Everybody just uses, let's say, either Impossible or, sorry, I don't want to say brands, but like those brands that you were mentioning. But we do make our own proteins, and we have a whole dedicated team we have a commissary kitchen that takes care of that. So we have our recipes, and everybody must like learn how to make those ingredients, etc. But that's what we stand aside, from every other vegan taco shop, if you want to call it, not using the same ingredients that everybody else uses. We make our own, of course. And like we mentioned earlier, Mexican cuisine, it's like Regina mentioned, it's about the spices, and it's about the peppers, and it's about the the ingredients that you add. So once you realize that the flavor is what makes Mexican cuisine, then that's when you're like, oh, okay, this is totally doable. So that's why having our own proprietary proteins, which we make ourselves, that's the key to our success, of course.
Sure. Going back to this idea too of Mexico and just the plethora of flavors and regions that Mexico offers, the myriad cuisines available, and of course Americans, we have a fairly narrow view of Mexican food. Long term, when you think about where Tacotarian can go, what you can accomplish, how do you hope to have affected Americans' view of Mexican food? What do you hope to have changed from their opinions and viewpoints of Mexican food? What do you hope to introduce them to?
Well, Mexican food is the most popular ethnic food there is in the United States. It is, us Latin and Mexicans make about 30% of the population here in the United States. So we want Mexican food. So we don't need to change anybody's minds. They love the food already. All we need to do is make sure that they're not afraid to try those, plant-based options that we offer, or anybody else. So that is the main thing, I think, the biggest hurdle, if you want to say that, like making sure that we provide, like you mentioned, providing good food that happens to be plant-based, and just try it. And like we mentioned, once you try it, you'll be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I cannot believe I was not having it because I thought of X, Y, and Z. So I think the aspect of the Mexican concept is on our side. The plant-based is the future of the food and beverage industry in a way. So it's just like having them try the our food or plant-based food, so we can change their minds in a little bit.
Sure. All right. So, Regina, you said that you've opened one a year. It's been 5 years. Don't want to gloss over the fact that that's been a pretty eventful 5 years, all things considered, going on in the world. Uh, and look, you guys knew this before you got into Tacotarian. Running a restaurant is hard. So not only are you opening a new concept, you're running a restaurant, and then you go through some of the most challenging couple of years the industry's ever seen.
Yeah.
What have been some of those challenges you guys have faced? What's been the most difficult hurdles that to arise in the 5 years of Tacotarian?
Well, definitely the hardest one was COVID. When COVID happened, it was, I mean, it happened to every restaurant around the world, but just didn't know what to expect, right? So the whole plan that we have in place from the first location, we had to swap it and change it. And, get creative, change systems, change the way we work as far as like where you buy your products, your labor, like we got very creative on a lot of the aspects on the company to survive. Where for us, at the end of all that, it was kind of a blessing because a lot of the systems that we put in place, we just kept, and it helped us a lot on saving money for the company, and like be more proactive and be a lot of things like COVID happened with it. But I think the hardest part, that the biggest challenge that we found opening one location after the other is making sure, I mean, it's a lot of people, right? So you want to make sure everyone's on the same page and they're representing your vision and what we've been working so hard for. So like, starting with the food, that's when we open our commissaries. We do have 2 commissaries that produce all the food for our 5 locations. And we're like, okay, this is done, this is checked, and that was step 1. Now, step 2, just make sure that all these new people that you're hiring in all your location are just representing the brand and doing everything Tacotarian standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ensuring that your staff is happy and representing your brand. We're very, very good with that, and creating relationships with our staff to make sure they cook with love. My grandma always says that if people don't cook with love, your food's not going to taste good. So we're always ensuring that we create a family from all our staff and all our locations to make sure they represent us, the brand, and make sure people come back. But I absolutely think that has been and still is the biggest challenge, making sure we stay within like our values and the brand, and our food is what we want to, and it's presented the way we want to, and people come back. But that'll be my number one challenge there.
The commissary thing's interesting. I imagine your past experience helped you to make the decision to develop that commissary model, because I don't think at this size many people think, oh, commissary, that's what we need to do. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the decision to open not 1 but 2 commissaries, which I imagine is for the 2 markets you're in. Why is the commissary model, though, important for you?
Well, the commissary was key for the flavors. Like we have a lot of like Mexican women in the kitchen that like put a little bit more salt here, like maybe 2 more scoops of like pepper, and like we really have a lot of people in our kitchens that cook very good food, and they know what they're doing. Look, a lot of our recipes came from them, but we realized on year 1 that our food was changing slightly between locations, and customers started saying like, oh, I like going to this location, they have the best beans, or oh, like we're going to this one, they have. So that's when we're like realized, okay, we're doing something wrong. We're like, people are liking the food, we have to have the same product everywhere. So that's when the idea of the commissary, bringing the commissary started it. And we just built it like from the recipes, getting the team together, all the processes for the health department to make sure that we were on code for like cooling methods, and do all our transfers, and and Dan from our team created like this back of the house like whole system for invoicing for us. It's quite impressive what we did with it, but like we did all the invoicing from the back. Everything's like live on pricing. It changes like every week.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have it, and I think we have something like very, very cool that we can implement it like later on when we open more stores. We can open more commissaries. But yeah, it does come from our experience from working in other restaurants. It kind of that was like I did it already. We can do this again. Like let's just put it together. So yeah, we just put it together, and that really is what's helping like the brand be like the same food everywhere.
Not to belabor this, but I haven't gotten into the sort of the commissary model too much with guests before, so I'm just kind of interested in for those who are listening who are not accommodated to the commissary model. Tell me about, this year we've talked about a lot about efficiencies. You guys might know Mark Zuckerberg declared it the year of efficiency, and certainly with restaurants, the amount of technology available to restaurants, efficiency is just very top of mind. Commissary kind of fits into that in my head. I mean, yes, it's sort of an extra operation, but it allows for efficiencies in the back of house for your restaurant. So if you wouldn't mind telling me about some of that, how does the commissary really improve the flow, the efficiency of the Tacotarian locations, and how are you using the commissary to, I guess, maximize what you can get out of each location?
Well, I don't want to go very deep on it, like 'cause I could talk about commissaries for an entire day. But like for us, so let's start with buying produce, right? I can do better pricing with my bulk, getting through the commissary. That was like number one. Then number two was the health department. I don't know if you ever heard about the health department in Nevada, but we have the strictest health department in the United States.
Fun.
Oh, okay.
It is like super, super intense, which is cool. We've like we work with them, we love them now, but they're strict. So it was from getting all the produce, then having a team that understood the recipes, follow the recipes, and the cooling method, and that's when the health department came in. Cooling method for batches that big, or even a small batch in a small restaurant, it's very hard to stay on code following a cooling method. So we make sure that we have the space in our commissaries and we create this new system with like chilling bags and bags and all these permits that we got for it. But that's you cool everything, and it comes out at temperature where it's safe, where like the all the locations where we distribute, we have our own drivers that distribute all our food, and then the locations just have to reheat for the day, which you eliminate so many risks at the small locations, from like cooking and cooling and reheating and space wise, because they don't have all that space at the neighborhood locations. So this way they just receive the food for the day, they reheat, and they start again the next day. So we have fresh food every day, we have safe food every day, and we eliminate a lot of labor on the smaller locations, because now we don't need the team prepping, and we only have a few people reheating, serving for the day, and they're out.
Yeah,
that's pretty much.
No, that's great. I mean, that labor part was what I was really thinking about there, which is like you can concentrate the high quality labor, call it the labor that, culinary labor, certainly. You concentrate that on the commissary, and it affords you the ability to not have high requirements for the labor in the storefronts, thereby making you be able to overcome a lot of the labor issues going on, I imagine.
You also, like, when you make a batch, it's just like a huge batch. So there's really not that much more labor that you're putting in. So that's another thing that we realize is like if each store have to, buy their product and then wash it and then cook it and then cool it, and then you have one person, but with that bigger batch, like the time goes down. Like we don't really spend that much money on our commissaries. Like we do have rock stars. Like all our teams or our commissaries are like wonderful. but I do, like, when we put all our numbers together, it just makes so much more sense.
Yes.
All right, so at the beginning of this, I mentioned that I've heard of you guys, and you guys have created a buzz. Now that buzz has been helped along by you've had several famous fans, as I understand it. We have Vice President Kamala Harris,
Yes.
Chelsea Handler, Carlos Santana, a lot of people who are big Tacotarian fans. Which, the restaurants have celebrities pass through, no big deal. But, I mean, this is a little bit something different. This is something where people aren't just going in for lunch and calling it a day. Obviously with Vice President Harris, that was a little bit more intentional, and
Yes.
that's a whole thing, having the Vice President come into your restaurant. But I guess what I'm curious to learn about is sort of the marketing elements of this. You guys have been able to build this to great success. What's key to capitalizing on buzziness? And I realize it's a little bit of a vague question because buzziness today is so hard to define, but social media and influencers and all these things that have kind of popped up have really changed the marketing game. So I think for everybody listening, curious as to how they can position their own restaurants to seem buzzy. How do you do that? How have you guys managed to really ride some of these high-profile visits and high-profile fans to the success that you have?
Yes. I'm going to take on this one. I really wish my wife was here. Kristen is in charge of all the marketing and social media, of course. She's amazing at what she does, of course, as you can clearly see through her brand. But I think the bigger part of the positive buzz is like to stay in touch with the community and not only stay in touch, but be a part of the community or whatever we have a location, like help through the charities, and also teach our staff as we grow that they represent us and they are Tacotarian. So we want them to be able to provide those same, reasons that people come to see us. Like we want them to be able to perform in the same way as we were there. Like they are us when we're not there. So that is a big part of it. Make all of our managers, staff, everybody to understand that, they are part of Tacotarian and they're so important and that they can, see your perspective and why we want to do certain things. I think just making them part of our decisions, it's what creates the buzz. And of course, stay in touch with, like I mentioned earlier, the food and beverage community here in Nevada or in Las Vegas. It's very close together. Like everybody knows each other. So whenever we have a chance, I call my friends or, hey, we're going to bring you food to your staff. I personally have brought vegan tacos to my friends who own steakhouses. And they're like, oh, my God, this is amazing. And changing their perspectives because we get customers who are like, hey, you're so-and-so from on the strip, named restaurant, told me to come here because your food is amazing. And that, creating that buzz, having that close bond with the community and the food and beverage industry is what keeps us, where we are. And of course, we love to have celebrities and we love to have Vice President Harris. We wish she could come in every time she's in Vegas, but we just have to stay on top of it, and treat everybody with respect and show everybody that we're all about good food and not just plant-based food. It's just good food that happens to be plant-based, of course.
Going back to Vice President Harris, I remember many years ago during President Obama, the President Obama administration, there was a restaurant where he visited, and I heard from the owner what that entailed, having the president come into your restaurant, and it was a lot. I mean, it was a whole week's worth of events.
Yes.
Do you guys have the same thing with Vice President Harris? Tell me about how all of that came together and what that was all like.
If you don't mind me, Regina. So this goes back about 8 months prior to that, or about a year. We were in LA,
Okay.
just doing some, research and development before we opened a different location. And at the time, it was the 2020 campaign for a presidential election. And out of the side of my eye, I saw Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey, which I know he's vegan. So I zigzagged to him and I told him, why haven't you been to my restaurant? And he was like, who are you? And we started talking. He was very kind, and he told me, next time I'm in Vegas, I'm going to come to your restaurant. His mom lives in Vegas. So a few days later, I get a phone call, and he's like, "Hey, Carlos, this is Senator Cory Booker," and I'm like, "What?" So he called me personally to tell me that he was coming to the restaurant, and that link with Cory Booker, Senator Booker, was the one who brought by VP Harris. He told her about us, and it was unannounced. Kristen and I happened to be at the restaurant by pure luck. We had no idea BP was coming, BP Harris, sorry, and we just got caught there. It was madness, if you want to. It's like 4 SWAT cars, like ambulances, like 6, 7 SUVs, patrol cars. Like it was like they blocked the freeway next to us, all the streets around us. They wouldn't let anybody come in. They wouldn't let anybody go out. We had deliveries coming in, and no, they couldn't get out. Like it was chaotic.
Wow.
So she did come in. She was extremely kind. She talked to everybody who wanted to have a conversation with her. She talked to pretty much everybody on the restaurant. She ordered her tacos and she left. And she loved them. So that's amazing.
I got to say, that's the ultimate word of mouth when a senator
Yes,
tells the vice president, you've got to go to this
totally.
taco joint in Las Vegas.
Yes,
And I would
I agree.
say too, like after that, it was nuts. Like we
Uh-huh.
have,
Yes.
it was so busy, and all our locations, not just the downtown location. We have people coming and asking for, can I have whatever the vice president had, and like we have like the
Yes.
the ticket, the receipt like printed, just so people knew what she ordered and they'll order the same food. But it definitely helped us a lot, like help us and people. I mean, we're so busy. It was crazy, 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 crazy busy.
It's like Cinco de
A good
Mayo every day.
problem to have. That's good for you, right? That's a
Yes,
good problem to have.
totally.
So, I mean, celebrity fan or no celebrity fan, just buzziness in general. Great menu, obviously. Getting a reputation on social media, online. I'm curious, how you do ride that wave. And Carlos, again, maybe this is a question for your wife, but
Hmm.
you guys have gone
Okay,
into another market. I imagine you're thinking
totally.
about additional markets after that. You must enter a market. You come in totally fresh. If anybody looks you up, they'll see, oh, this is the taco place that Vice President Harris went
Yes.
to. But I guess sustaining that buzz is more what I'm thinking of as you scale. How can you go from being Las Vegas's favorite plant-based taco joint to the United States' favorite, plant-based taco joint? How do you
Yeah.
scale buzz in the end?
Well, we are the best taqueria, the best vegan taqueria in the United States. We just won the award by Veggie Awards. So that's like the Oscars of the vegan community. So we are the best
Congratulations,
taqueria
amazing.
already. So we're so excited for that. Uh, to create the buzz and keep the buzz, I think it is important because like we need to have those processes and systems in place before we continue to grow. And we're actively looking, always looking for strategic partners to help us grow. So I know you have a lot of listeners that, this is what they do. So if they're listening, please reach out to us. We want to, grow. And this is like the big hump that everybody talks about. Like once you have 5, 6 stores, how do you get to 100 or 200? So that's what we're working actively on at the moment. So while we try to do that, we're trying to keep going, of course. Regina?
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is to stay fresh, right? Like I think where we understand our menu and a lot of our menu, it's like very colorful and fun. We're always trying to bring like food specials just to people that come all the time. They have a new dish and they're not bored. We try to follow trends. Like if there's something going on, we try to like pitch in and bring a new dish for that. Again, we go back to our kitchen and our ourselves. Like we always like when we brought the birria, like the birria was booming, and we're like, okay, let's make a vegan birria, and it's one of our best sellers at the restaurant. I
Yeah.
think not being afraid to bring new dishes. If they work, they work. If they don't, we just remove them from the menu. Uh, Creating events for the community, or like reaching out and partner with other companies or other people. I think we're constantly trying to connect. We're uh, we're constantly trying to create new things and new dishes for people so we can connect with them as well with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's that just don't settle for what you have just because it's working. You have to continue working and
Exactly.
innovating and bringing new things, just so people don't get bored. I mean, it's so easy for people to get bored. Where like people, food is a necessity, you still have to excite them.
Yeah.
That's
Just
good.
if I might
Yeah.
add something else, like
Yeah.
to you, Regina, last Friday, we did a collaboration with a local pizza place. We did a vegan birria pizza, amazing. And yeah, speaking to those things, like we sold out within an hour, and it was an amazing, amazing event. So those kind of things like keep us, like buzzy and like on topic, of course.
Sure.
Those kind of
I,
collaborations for sure.
Carlos, you mentioned the concept of growth, that idea of going, how do you go from 5 to 200,
Yeah.
which sounds like you're interested in doing. So buckle up because you guys are about to find out what that looks like. But how are you preparing this brand for growth? What do you think ultimately is the trajectory for this thing?
Well, we are still working on it. Of course, we want to make sure that we have everything in place before we do the big jump to something else. It's not easy, as you clearly know. It's a lot of things. We want to make sure that we can provide those same quality food items, even if it's San Diego, Phoenix, or Texas, anywhere. And of course, it's one of those things that we got to make sure that everything's in place before we do that. And like I mentioned, we are looking for these partners, which I know they're everywhere, and we're learning as we go. So if anybody's listening again, we're interested in listening to you and learning from you, of course. Uh, yeah.
I absolutely know that the brand has the potential for it. I think we have proven it in the last 5 years of like what having a plant-based Mexican restaurant available in all neighborhoods or a lot of different states in the United States. I think that in order for veganism to grow, we need to have accessible food for people, right? So I think we're a very vegan friendly and non-vegan friendly concept where vegans and non-vegans can have this Mexican food and be happy when they leave and come back. So I think that's what we have that a lot of the other vegan concepts don't have. Like we're just
Yeah.
providing a good taco shop in every neighborhood. And I think that's what's going to help us scale this project and like have a lot of more tacotarians, making sure that vegans and not vegans eat there.
Yeah, that's great. Carlos, Regina, last question for you. And Regina, maybe we'll start with you, but I'm curious to get both of your perspectives. 5 years in, 5 locations for Tacotarian. What have you learned that, we talk about, partnering with other brands, looking ahead to growth. There are going to be many others like you coming into this business who, whatever their menu item, whatever they build their brand around, they're going to be working on getting from 1 to 5. And then like you looking for, how to get from 5 to 200, for example. What have you learned in 1 to 5? What are the lessons you've picked up that those who will come after you and go after this same journey of starting a restaurant and scaling it, that you would recommend to them? Regina, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, your tips that you've learned over the last 5 years.
Well, I think they've asked this question to me before, where I think the key is your team, the team and your vibe. I think having a team that we understand their roles within the company and everybody shines on their own department helps people just do the best at what they do. And I think that's on our team what helps our growth. And then just go with the flow. I mean, work hard. Don't get me wrong. We work so hard. Like when people say like, how many hours do you work? We work 24/7. Okay. We're always available for this restaurant and you have to work very, very, very hard. But I also believe that that energy that you put towards your project, like that vibe that you bring in, where like, there's no problems. There's just solutions. Let's just go with the flow. And then if there's a hump on the way, like how can we fix this and how can we make this better so in the next location we can improve with it. But it's definitely surround yourself with people that have your same vision and make a great team, and try to pass that energy towards your staff and the people that want to work around you, because if they get you and they get your vibe again, I think it'll be easier to mimic that when you open 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. Like, and that's another thing with Tacotarian. Tacotarian is not just a taco shop or not a Mexican restaurant. It's a whole vibe. Like when you go in,
Mm.
it's like the atmosphere, like the interior design, the music, like everything. It feels, you feel something when you go into a Tacotarian. It's not just the food.
Yeah,
Carlos,
we'll
any
see.
thoughts from you?
Yeah, of course. Like, I think everybody must have like the right partners if they want to continue to grow, for sure. That is number one. A lot of people put that, like, oh, we'll be fine. They don't even write down, anything, their goals or like operating agreements, etc. So have your ducks in a row. Make sure you have all those like systems and processes. Like we continue to say, it is so important. Like have your own rules. Have all those. Employee handbooks, like explaining everything, make it as easy as possible so you can continue to grow with your company. Teach your staff how you want them to do certain things, like, and of course, lead by example. Do not expect people to do what you're not willing to do. So those things, as on top of what Regina mentioned, are, I think, the keys to success. And always be learning of your mistakes. Of course, a big key for us was the commissary kitchens that helped us to continue to grow. And as we are being successful with our own stores, we know that like what it's going to take to continue to go after that next couple restaurants. So we want to make sure, before you even go into a market, like make sure you have everything ready, like from the data for your location, for like foot traffic, like what's like what do people like to eat around there, like all those little points and data that everybody like probably don't pay attention to. It's so important, all the little details, for sure.
That's great. Carlos, Regina, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining me and talking about Tacotarian. Good luck
Thank
to you
you.
guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Sam. Thank you
you.
for having us. We're a pleasure.
Restaurant leaders need two things to grow their businesses. They need connections to better inform their decision making, and they need a break. Running a restaurant company is hard work. Nation's Restaurant News is offering both this fall at our Create Experience. Held October 1st through 3rd in beautiful Palm Springs, California, the Create Experience promises to be an unforgettable 3 days for growth-minded restaurateurs. Better yet, it's totally free for restaurant leaders. Join us in Palm Springs to be a part of this one-of-a-kind experience. Visit create.nrn.com/Palm Springs to learn more and to register. That's create.nrn.com/Palm Springs. That was my interview with Tacotarian co-founders Regina, Simmons, and Carlos Corral. So what should you learn from this interview? Here are my 7 takeaways. My first takeaway is that the signature flavors for global cuisines are not meat-based. That makes global cuisine the perfect vehicle for plant-based cuisine. And as Regina and Carlos both talked about, the flavors of Mexico, of course, are incredibly diverse. Mexico is made up of myriad cultures, cuisines, regions, and the flavors are all about sauces, spices, ingredients like vegetables. It makes it really a perfect cuisine to showcase plant-based flavors, and that's exactly what Tacotarian is doing. It is exciting to see how the fast casual world is embracing, of course, global cuisines, but also to see what the role plant-based food could be in that future. My second takeaway is that just because there is not demand for your product doesn't mean that it won't succeed. When Tacotarian jumped into this plant-based Mexican game in Las Vegas back in 2018, they said there wasn't really a demand for vegan Mexican food, but they knew that locals would really love the flavors. And sure enough, that has been the case. And they've created an incredible buzz around Vegas and now into San Diego. The point is that if you have an interesting idea and you think there could be something to it, maybe you should just go ahead and try it. Maybe it doesn't need to, you don't need to find some hole in the market. You don't need to find the demand necessarily. If you can trust in your flavors and you can trust in your product quality, then that might be enough to create that demand in your community wherever you are. I think it's really interesting to point out, as Regina and Carlos spoke a lot on this call, they want to convert non-vegans to the food they're serving at Tacotarian because, as they say, it depends on non-vegans to make it work. To thrive as a business, they can't just serve vegans. They have to have non-vegans come in as well. So they've created that demand among the vegan community, but also among the non-vegan community. My third takeaway is that the biggest hurdle for vegan food is consumer perception. Of course, vegan food, when you use that vegan label, it kind of says something to consumers. And for the longest time, that's been kind of a negative connotation, flavorless or tofu or whatever that might be. And we've come a long way, of course, but there is still that hurdle that consumers have that vegan isn't for them, or that if they're not a vegan, why would they eat vegan? Tacotarian and the co-founders, they want to normalize vegan food and say that you can still be, not a vegan. You could still eat meat plenty of days of the week. But even if you just choose one day a week to eat vegan and choose Tacotarian or a brand like that, then it makes a case for that business and helps to spread the word of vegan food and can continue to push you toward plant-based options. Regina says, she feels like people have been brainwashed to believe that vegan is bad. And, of course, what she means by that is just our perception from the time we're born is that you have to have meat on your plate to make it good. We, of course, now know and have known that's not the case. But brands like Tacotarian, that is the hurdle they face and continue to try to clear. My fourth takeaway is that commissaries can help you ensure consistency and efficiency. The commissary model has been a part of the restaurant world for eons, forever, really. But it's important to know how an emerging brand like Tacotarian is capitalizing on the commissary model, even with just 5 locations. Tacotarian has 2 commissaries, and they clearly know what they're doing with this. And as Regina and Carlos described in this interview, when you have a commissary and you centralize the preparation and production of your food, you can make sure that all of your locations are serving the same flavors. You can ensure that consistency. But you can also concentrate a lot of your labor on the commissary so that you don't have to equip every restaurant with the labor necessary to prepare the menu items. There are a range of other benefits to having a commissary that they talked about. For example, your supply that you can direct to one location of the commissary versus all of the many locations that the commissary is serving. You just have to do more bulk preparation instead of single preparation. Like Regina said, that's just a mindset shift. Labor, of course. Health codes. That was something that they described that I thought was really fascinating because they said Nevada has very strict health codes. And the commissary, again, helps them to sort of centralize a lot of the work that goes into meeting those health codes. And they also eliminate risks by concentrating that food prep at the commissary and not having each store do it. I could go on. And as Regina said, she could go on and on about the benefits of a commissary. Look into that if you haven't already for how that can help you to be consistent and to be efficient. My fifth takeaway is that if you want to build a buzz, start by building close community ties. I really wanted to talk with Regina and Carlos and the team at Tacotarian because of the buzz that they have built. Even I mentioned in this interview, I've heard plenty about Tacotarian, and I'm on the East Coast while they're on the West Coast, and it's largely around some of this buzz that they've built, especially with some of the high-profile celebrity fans that they have. But as Carlos says, building that buzz, you really have to have close relationships in your community to have that foundation. Nonprofits, local organizations, of course, with customers, build those close ties with them, whether that's through social media or other digital channels, or of course, whether that's face-to-face. Beyond that, build relationships with others in the food and beverage scene in your local community. If you take care of them, they're going to take care of you. All these relationships, if you put it out in the world, it kind of comes back around to you, and people will lift your brand up and help to create that buzz. And eventually it could really lead to some of those high profile guests that can really take you from buzzy locally to buzzy nationally. Speaking of that, of course, my sixth takeaway, Word of mouth works wonders, especially if it's among celebrities. It's an incredible story of how Tacotarian has built this buzz, and they talked about some of those high-profile guests that have really helped to put them on the map. And it really doesn't get much bigger than Vice President Kamala Harris, who visited Tacotarian back in 2021. But I love the story that Carlos told about how it led to the Kamala Harris visit to Tacotarian, which is that at first Carlos saw Senator Cory Booker at an event and got him some food. And then Senator Booker had the word of mouth that he passed along to Vice President Harris, and she visited Tacotarian. Of course, word of mouth works for all customers, not just celebrities or politicians, but it's a great example of how if you can start to build word of mouth among regular customers and, of course, high-profile guests, it can really pay dividends. But I think there's something to note there, too, about Carlos's determination to get Senator Booker the Tacotarian food, which is that if he hadn't have taken that chance, who knows if they probably would have never had that visit from Vice President Harris, which has continued to be very beneficial to them. So take a chance and try to build that word of mouth, especially among your high-profile guests. My seventh and final takeaway is that to build a successful restaurant business, start with partners you trust and a team that shares your vision. Regina and Carlos they worked together along with Regina's husband, Dan, for about 15 years before they started Tacotarian. So, of course, they had a very close relationship and they trusted each other. And that's important to the foundation of their business. But as Regina said at the end of our interview, when she talked about some tips she was providing, she said they really surrounded themselves with people who could shine in their individual departments and who could really buy into the vision of Tacotarian and the passion that the founders have. That is really important as you build your business. Surround yourself with those people you trust and who share that vision and that passion. It will help you take you to the ambitious goals you might set for yourself and your brand. Those are all my takeaways for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to Takeaway wherever you listen to podcasts and leave your feedback. You can also email me at sam.oches@informa.com. Thanks again and talk to you next week.